Welcome to Sunny's Mindset Lab podcast. Today we're exploring Subliminal Persuasion with its author Dave Lakhani. This book examines how influence, messaging, and persuasion shape decisions at levels we're often unaware of. And today we're unpacking those ideas carefully and responsibly.
Thank you, Sunny. Subliminal Persuasion was written to help people understand how influence actually works, how messages spread, and how persuasion can be applied ethically, intentionally, and effectively.
Host Dave, it is so great to have you here. To really get into the meat of this, we've kind of structured our chat today around 5 big ideas from your book. First, we're going to start by uncovering this hidden persuasive intent that you say is behind pretty much all communication. Then, we'll dive into how some messages just go viral while others fizzle out. After that, we'll explore the really deep psychology of memory and belief, like how these ideas actually get hardwired into our brains. And that naturally leads us to the bigger picture, the mechanics of propaganda. And we'll wrap it all up with what I think is the most important part, drawing that ethical line between influence and what becomes manipulation. Sound like a plan?
Sounds perfect, Sonny. Let's do it.
Awesome. So let's start right there with that really foundational idea. When most of us hear the word persuasion, our minds immediately jump to a car salesman or maybe a lawyer in a courtroom. But you make the case that that's just a tiny piece of the puzzle. You argue that persuasion is actually the whole point of almost all communication.
Exactly. Yeah, we've been conditioned to think persuasion is this big, obvious thing, but really, it's the water we're all swimming in. Frederick Douglass got it. He knew its power wasn't just for big speeches, it's in everything we say and do. Think about the most simple everyday interactions. You tell your spouse, "Wow, you look gorgeous tonight." Is that just a simple observation? Of course not. It's packed with persuasive intent. You want them to feel good, you want them to feel loved, you want to strengthen that connection, maybe set the mood for a great evening. Every single word is chosen to create an effect. Even just saying, "I love you," is probably one of the most powerful persuasive acts there is. It's meant to build and maintain an entire emotional reality between two people.
Okay, I could definitely see that in intentional statements. But what about communication that just feels informational? Like, say, a weather report. Surely there's no hidden motive there, right? That is the perfect example of how persuasion can work even when the sender has zero conscious intent. Just look at the two phrases here. On the one hand, "Honey, the dog is outside," is clearly intentional. The subtext is, "Hey, it's your turn," or "Can you please get the dog?" It's designed to get someone to do something. But then you have the weatherman who just says, "It's 78 degrees outside." He's just stating a fact. But what happens the second you hear that? Your behavior has changed. You decide, okay, I'm not going to wear a jacket. Your action was directly persuaded by that piece of data. So it shows that the persuasive effect of a message has nothing to do with the sender's intent. Information, by its nature, changes us.
And that brings us right to the title of your book, Subliminal. I think for a lot of people, that word conjures up that old myth about a single frame of popcorn being flashed in a movie theater. But you're talking about something way more sophisticated than that. Right, that popcorn story is a classic bit of folklore. The real power of subliminal persuasion isn't about flashing images somebody can't see. It's about priming. It's about introducing stimuli just below the radar of our conscious thought that prepare or prime us to act in a certain way later on. It's about building a message in such a way that the conclusion you want someone to reach feels like it was their own idea all along. The goal is to sidestep that critical analytical part of the brain and plant a seed that's going to influence a decision down the road.
Okay, so once you've crafted this persuasive message, whether it's overt or subliminal, the next big hurdle is making it spread. You call this message contagion, which I love. It's not enough for just one person to get it. It has to be infectious. It has to move on its out.
Exactly. And the real key to contagion is to understand how we form our deepest beliefs in the first place. The most powerful, unshakable beliefs we have are transmitted to us through these kinds of foundational relationships. Think about it. What your parents teach you as a kid isn't framed as their opinion. It's just reality. The same dynamic is at play with a trusted teacher, a boss, a spiritual guide, or a spouse. These are channels of incredibly high trust. So a persuasive message that can piggyback on a belief that was formed through one of these channels, it has a massive advantage. Because it doesn't feel like a new argument. It feels like an established truth.
So is there a template for how a new message can sort of replicate that kind of power, even if it doesn't come from a parent or a teacher?
Absolutely. And the perfect model for this is the urban legend. I mean, they spread like wildfire with zero advertising budget, and there's a reason why. They follow this formula perfectly. First, it's always a vivid story, and it usually plugs right into a fear or belief we already have. Second, It's told with urgency, like this is critical information you need right now. Third, it's always presented as true, often using that friend of a friend thing to create a layer of social proof. Fourth, it has a huge emotional punch that makes it stick in your brain. And then, this is the real magic. The story is built in a way that makes you, the listener, feel this immediate need to go warn someone else. You become the spreader. If you want a message to go viral, you have to build it like an urban legend.
That is such a powerful framework, and your book has this amazing real-world example of it with the advertising genius Howard Gossage. Just looking at this headline, you can already feel that emotional pull.
Oh, Gossage was a master. This was back in the 1960s. The Sierra Club was in this big fight to stop a plan to build dams that would literally flood part of the Grand Canyon. So Gossage comes up with this headline. Let's just break it down. Now, only you, boom, right away, urgency and personal responsibility, can save the Grand Canyon. Now the stakes are heroic. From being flooded, there's the immediate threat, and then the killer blow, for profit. In just 2 words, he creates this powerful, faceless villain, corporate greed. It stopped being an ad and became a call to arms.
And this is where the subliminal genius really comes in. This is what I call the folded message. The obvious, overt message was simple. Save the Grand Canyon. I mean, who's going to argue with that? It's an easy yes. But folded inside that simple idea was a much bigger, harder sell for the 1960s. Become a conservationist. Join the Sierra Club. He used the easy outrage about the dams to sell the much larger, more complex idea of environmentalism. People responded to save a landmark, and in the process they adopted a whole new identity. And the result? The dams were stopped, and the Sierra Club's membership just exploded.
Wow, that is such a brilliant strategy. Okay, so we've got a message with a folded subliminal intent, and we've built it to spread. So now let's go inside the receiver's mind. How do these messages actually get encoded to the point that they stick and actually change behavior? You break this down into 3 different types of memory.
That's right. You have to think of it as a tiered process. The very first gate you have to get your message through is semantic memory. This is your short-term, working memory. It's like the RAM on your computer. If I give you a phone number to remember, you're holding it right here, but it's very fragile. So to make an idea stick in semantic memory long enough for someone to act on it, you have to hit it with things like repetition, emotion, urgency, or scarcity. A limited time offer is a perfect example. It's a classic tool designed to hijack your semantic memory and force a quick decision before that thought just evaporates. But for a message to have a really lasting impact, it has to connect to something deeper, episodic memory. These aren't just random facts. These are the stories and the feelings of our lives. If I say the word Disneyland to you, you don't just recall a list of attractions. You recall a whole collection of feelings and sounds and smells and moments, a whole episode. A really masterful persuader knows that creating a brand new emotion from scratch is almost impossible. It's too much work. So instead, they find a way to link their idea to a powerful, positive episode that's already living in your mind. They essentially borrow the emotion that's already there. And that all leads to the ultimate goal, which is to reach procedural memory. This is basically your brain's hard drive. It's where automatic skills like riding a bike or tying your shoes are stored. But what's so critical is that this is also where your core beliefs and your automatic decision-making habits live. When an idea makes the leap from just being a thought or a feeling into procedural memory, it becomes a belief. It's no longer something you have to think about. It becomes part of the filter through which you see the world. You act on it automatically without conscious thought. And for a persuader, getting their message to land here, that's the holy grail.
This is such a powerful model. Let's make it really concrete. You use the creation of the entire organic food market as this perfect long-term campaign that targeted all 3 memory types, one after the other. Can you just walk us through how that worked?
Sure. It's a fantastic example because this was a persuasive campaign that played out over decades. It really got started back in the 80s and 90s, just by tapping into this general, pre-existing suspicion that our food was getting less nutritious, full of chemicals. That just sort of primed the pump. Then, in the early 2000s, marketers made this absolutely brilliant move. They targeted episodic memory. They started using this idea food doesn't taste like it did when you were a child. And that just evokes these incredibly powerful nostalgic memories of home and safety and authenticity. So once that emotional anchor was set, they introduced the solution, organic food. The implied logic was, of course it tastes better. It's pure, it's more natural, just like the food from your best memories. And then, finally, to lock it all into procedural memory, they attached it to identity and status. The message became, good parents, the best families, successful people, they buy organic. And now, for millions of people, buying organic isn't a critical evaluation of nutritional science. It's an automatic identity-affirming choice.
That case study is incredible. It really demonstrates how these individual psychological tools can be scaled way up to change an entire market. And that brings us to an even bigger scale, and frankly, a much more charged and uncomfortable word:
propaganda.
Yeah, it is a charged word, and for very good reason, but it's one we absolutely have to understand. The father of modern public relations, a man named Edward Bernays, who, by the way, was Sigmund Freud's nephew, he wasn't afraid of that word at all. He actually wrote a book called Propaganda. And as you can see from this quote, he didn't view it as some evil, sinister practice. He genuinely believed that in a complex, modern society, the masses couldn't really be trusted to make good decisions on their own. He thought an intelligent, sort of invisible government had a responsibility to consciously manipulate public opinion for what he saw as the good of society. And he wasn't just some theorist writing in a book. He was instrumental in what might be one of the most successful propaganda campaigns in American history during World War I. That's right, he served on something called the Creel Committee. You have to remember the context here. President Woodrow Wilson won his re-election campaign in 1916 on the slogan, "He kept us out of war." America was deeply, deeply isolationist at the time. So the government's job was to completely flip public opinion, do a total 180. The Creel Committee was created to do exactly that. It was the very first U.S. government agency dedicated purely to propaganda, and its entire mission was to sell the war by reframing it, not as a European conflict, but as a noble, moral crusade to make the world safe for democracy.
You know, the sheer scale of their operation is just hard to comprehend today. They used every single medium available: posters, movies, newspaper articles. But their most effective weapon was a literal army of 75,000 volunteers they called the 4-Minute Men. These were respected local figures in their communities, and they would deliver these short, powerful, emotionally charged pro-war speeches, all written by the committee, anywhere people gathered, in movie theaters, in churches, in town squares. They were basically a human social media network, and they were unbelievably effective.
And the results were, well, they were dramatic. It wasn't just that people started supporting the war. The campaign fundamentally altered American culture.
Oh, it unleashed this tidal wave of anti-German hysteria. It suddenly became patriotic to hate anything and everything German. You had 14 states that banned teaching the German language. People held public ceremonial book burnings. Orchestras refused to play Beethoven. I mean, it went to levels that seem almost comical now, with people renaming sauerkraut Liberty Cabbage and German Shepherds Alsatians. It's just a chilling reminder of how quickly and how completely a well-executed propaganda campaign can reshape an entire society's beliefs and behaviors.
So these tools are clearly incredibly powerful, which brings us to the final, and I really think the most important part of this conversation, the ethics of it all. After the war, Bernays took these exact same techniques and brought them to the corporate world, essentially creating the industry we now call public relations. He did, and his work for the American Tobacco Company is probably the ultimate case study in this. At the time, it was a major social taboo for women to smoke in public. The tobacco company wanted to double its market. So Bernays didn't try to sell cigarettes, he sold an idea. He staged this famous PR stunt during the 1929 Easter Parade in New York, where he hired fashionable debutantes to march in the parade while defiantly lighting up cigarettes. And he had already tipped off the press to watch for women lighting their torches of freedom. He brilliantly linked the physical act of smoking to the powerful social movement of women's liberation. All of a sudden, smoking wasn't a dirty habit. It was an act of female empowerment and rebellion.
It's just a masterclass in applying all these principles we've talked about: reframing, emotional connection, message contagion. But you share this one personal detail about Bernays that comes from his own daughter, and it just reveals this profound ethical hypocrisy right at the heart of it all.
It's jaw-dropping, isn't it? And this is the critical point. While he was engineering this brilliant campaign to convince millions of American women that smoking was a symbol of freedom, he was at home, desperately trying to get his own wife, Doris, to quit smoking. He knew exactly how unhealthy and dangerous it was. His daughter tells stories of him finding his wife's cigarettes, snapping them in two, and flushing them down the toilet. I mean, you can't find a more stark illustration of the ethical dilemma. He was using his genius to promote a behavior in the masses that he knew was harmful and that he would never want for his own family.
So after walking through all of this, Dave, where does that leave us? Are these techniques of persuasion, are they inherently good or evil? Dave Lakhani. They are neither. They are simply tools. Persuasion is like a hammer. You can use that hammer to build a beautiful home for a family, or you can use it as a weapon to hurt someone. The morality is never, ever in the tool. It's in the intent of the person holding it. The whole reason I wrote the book was to make these tools visible. Because when you understand how persuasion works, you can start to see it being used on you. And that allows you to make conscious choices. And when you choose to use it yourself, you're forced to confront your own intent. So this final question, it really isn't for me to answer. It's for every single person who's listening.
Dave, thank you for walking us through Subliminal Persuasion. This conversation helps our listeners understand how influence works and how to engage with it responsibly.
Thank you, Sunny. My hope is that understanding persuasion leads to better decisions, clearer communication, and ethical influence.
This has been Sunny's Mindset Lab. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.